Hello gardeners, it is the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July. We are staying home this year for a couple of reasons. One is we're doing our part to try to contain the old coronavirus, COVID-19. And so we're not doing any traveling this weekend, and we're staying home and keeping our circle small. The other reason is it's not much fun to go in the lake, if you can't go in the water. So we're home this weekend, and I'm going to do some work in the garden, and it's actually a really good thing I'm here, because even though for me it's really early in the year to start getting any diseases on my plants, I have diseases on my plants and they really need to be taken care of. They're really concerning to me, and I'm going to walk through the garden with you and just show you the 3 things that are on my mind this weekend, and we'll talk about what I'm going to do to remedy them. The garden really is doing awesome, and I will do a garden tour soon. These things just keep coming up and I want to do them first, but we'll go through and do a garden tour pretty soon. So my main area of concern for today is really my Roma tomato plant. So this entire bed that we're looking at here is all Roma tomatoes on both sides of the cattle panel trellis. I do a lot of Romas because they're really great for sauce and salsa. They're great canning tomatoes, but they are pretty susceptible to diseases. So this time I'm concerned because the disease on this plant is a little bit different from what I've seen before. Lots of people will look at a disease on a tomato plant and go, oh, that's blight. But I don't really know what this is. It could be a number of things. It could be a blight. More likely it's some sort of a leaf spot, but you know, I spent hours last night looking up diagnosis for different tomato diseases, and I can't decide what this is. But the only real way I know to treat it is, you know, the same way you would treat any blight or bacterial leaf spot virus is really a copper fungicide. Seems to take care of a lot of the different kinds, and that's how I'm going to treat these. So if you take a look at this leaf, you can see, you know, the yellowing and spotting on the plants. But what I don't see, you know, I don't see any of the concentric rings that are typical of like a blight, for example. And I also don't see some of the more typical signs of the bacterial leaf spot, because this is the back of a leaf. You know, the bacterial leaf spot generally would have some little darker specks in the middle of these spots. So unfortunately, I don't really know what this is. I would take anyone's advice who might be able to tell me. What I can say is one of the first symptoms that I saw on the plants was really, let's see if I can find where I saw that. It was a darkening of the stem right, you know, right near these nodes. You know, we get all these spots on the stem. So, like I said, I don't know for sure what it is, but it really doesn't matter because the diseases that I'm suspecting are all treated the same way. So I'll come back to this when I'm ready to treat it, and I will show you how to take care of this. And hopefully this doesn't spread. Here's another thing that I noticed that just really didn't seem typical of what I would normally see in a leaf spot, is that this, whatever is on here seems to be really getting in there and attacking the veins of these leaves. And look at that stem. That's crazy. That's crazy disease on that stem. I feel like I maybe should just pull this tomato out. I'm gonna do a little bit more searching because I hate to lose a plant. If you know what this is, let me know, because this doesn't look like what I've seen in the past. So this one looks like a really infected plant too. You look at all the circle-y kind of spots on the stem here. like I said, the Roma variety is super great for canning, making salsas and sauces. But they are known to be pretty susceptible to disease. And besides that, I haven't been able to get out here. I broke both of my wrists about a month ago, and so I haven't had time to come out here. Well, it's not that I haven't had time, it's that I haven't had the ability to come out here and spray for diseases and spray for insects and really trim these leaves like I would normally like to. And so these plants are really getting away from me. But the other concern that I have for my tomato plants, and this is just happening on my Romas, is blossom end rot. And that's happening right here. Blossom end rot is really common. And it happens often in the first tomatoes you get of the season. It's not really a disease. It is a deficiency. So in this case, it's a calcium deficiency. And it can be tricky to treat, although generally I would say I've never had a problem where I got blossom end rot and it didn't just resolve it, you know, eventually. But it's a calcium deficiency in the plant, which doesn't necessarily mean that there's not enough calcium in your soil. What it means is that your plant is having a problem actually uptaking the calcium from the soil. So that's usually due from issues with watering. I suspected this would become a problem because we did have some extreme weather here recently, where we just had some really torrential rains, and I knew that it was going to be too much water at once for these plants, and then followed by and preceded by really, really hot weather. So I knew blossom end rot was going to be a problem. And I predicted that also from last year, because last year I had blossom end rot. This year I did treat my soil with lime, some garden lime, and I also put eggshells in the planting holes because I really didn't want to deal with blossom end rot this year. So I'm really disappointed that I'm dealing with this again. I'm disappointed in the blossom end rot, but more so I'm really concerned with this disease that's on these tomatoes. So there are a few things I'm going to try, and I'll show them to you as we move on. But before we do, there's one more issue I'm seeing that I want to show to you. So I have several varieties of cucumbers and squashes that are growing on this arched trellis. Most of them are looking really great. This trellis has 2 varieties of pickling cucumber. They all look really good. They've got a few spots on here. I'm not worried about those at all. That happens, and we'll be able, I treated them with neem oil yesterday and they should be just fine. Same over here. They're still doing really well. This variety is a Miss Pickler, and it seems to be a little bit more spotty, maybe a little bit more susceptible to disease, I don't know, than the other variety. So I'm going to keep an eye on this. I haven't grown any of these. There's 2 varieties on this side, 2 varieties on this side. I haven't grown any of them in years past, so this is really a learning period for me. So far they're doing awesome. Now these, there's 2 varieties here. The one on this side, so like the right side, that's really, really yellowing, is called a Sweet Success cucumber. And so these are my second year, so they were second year seeds, and that may have something to do with it. Last year they were my best producer, and they had really great cucumbers on them, and they're kind of the long, thin English style cucumber, and they were excellent tasting. They stayed crispy. I was even able to pickle some. They weren't the best, but they were better than, a regular slicing cucumber for pickling. But one thing I noticed even last year, that all of my other cucumbers were very healthy, but this Sweet Success variety was very problematic for me. And now that I'm planting it a second year, I can see it's going to be a problem again, and I may just pull that out. The same goes right here for this straight 8 cucumber. It is, again, old seeds may have something to do with it, but it's just not doing well. Last year they didn't do well either. And rather than trying to continue to grow those plants that I can already see are going to be problematic, I think these are going to come out, and I'll start some seeds and grow another batch of cucumbers. I don't know what kind yet, but I definitely don't think I want to waste my time on those. So I'm actually going to go inside now that I've looked at these tomatoes again, and I'm just going to take one more attempt at diagnosing that browning and blackening on the tomato plants, especially that on the stems, because like I said, it's really concerning. And I'll come back and we'll start treating these. I may end up pulling some plants out if they look really bad, but mostly I'll probably do everything I can to try to save them. Alright, here's the verdict. I don't think there is a disease problem in my tomato plants. I searched and searched to figure out what the spots are, and nothing seemed to fit, right? So early blight didn't seem to fit because, you know, there's a distinct characteristics of these concentric rings that form the spots on the tomato leaf, and they didn't exist in my case. It isn't late blight, it's early in the season for one thing, and then also late blight also has this characteristic of kind of having this moldy, kind of filmy spores on the spots too. So it didn't look like late blight to me either. Third, I thought for sure it must be Septoria leaf spot. And, you know, up close, it didn't look like that either. So I was really stumped, and I searched further, and I searched some of my favorite Facebook groups, and I ran across on there, somebody had said, looks like a nutrient deficiency. I hadn't thought of that at all. And if you take a look at the leaf, this doesn't look like disease. This looks a lot like what might be... It's hard to paint your nails when you only have partial use of your hands. This looks a lot like maybe a phosphate deficiency or phosphorus deficiency, or maybe something else. So that sort of makes sense to me because I haven't had this problem a lot in the past. So I didn't think it was anything soil-borne. And also because I haven't been able to spend a lot of time in the garden, I haven't fertilized very much. And the only fertilizer that my garden really has gotten so far this year is some of this guy. So this is just an all-purpose plant food. I did put a slow release fertilizer in the planting hole, so that should help, but perhaps, you know, it just, we're ready for another top dressing or side dressing to go in, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this kind of all-purpose fertilizer is really great for getting our plants started. But once the plants are established, you need something a little bit different. So when you think about fertilizer, understand that there are 3 macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and they're referred to as N, P, and K, right? So they're chemical letters in the periodic table. I don't remember what they're called, but this kind of fertilizer is really a lot higher in nitrogen than the phosphorus and potassium, so it's really great at getting that new bushy, bright green leafy growth, because that's the nitrogen producing big leafy greens and not really focusing a lot of nutrients on, you know, root development, fruit development, and that sort of thing. So establishing your plants and all-purpose fertilizer is just fine. And I think what happened is I grew some really big leafy nitrogen-rich plants in a short period of time, but maybe I was deficient in a few other things like phosphorus, potassium, A few other more micronutrients like phosphor, zinc, manganese, and magnesium are all things that our tomato plants need and don't necessarily get a ton of it from the all-purpose plant food. We know, because we saw the blossom end rot on those tomatoes, we know that there is a deficiency in calcium for sure. But just understanding that maybe this year, you know, I should have started a little bit of more robust fertilizer a little sooner. So I had already bought tomato tone. I just haven't used it yet, and I will, and this will help. So this fertilizer has much less nitrogen in proportion to the phosphorus and potassium, and so having this in the garden will help. However, this is a granular fertilizer and it's organic, which means, you know, I'm going to take this out and I'm going to sprinkle it onto the ground around the tomato plants, and it's got to get down into the soil. And then what happens is the good bacteria and the other soil life that's in the soil is going to release the nutrients from this. This is not a fast acting fertilizer at all. So anytime you see the granular fertilizer, expect that to take a little bit longer to work. I want something that's going to work immediately. So I headed off to the Home Depot. It's a 4th of July, and there's not a lot open, and actually a lot of the shelves were bare. So there weren't a lot of choices, but I settled on this in Miracle-Gro Organics, specifically for edibles. And so just like the tomato tone, this is going to be a lot lighter in nitrogen and heavier phosphorus and potassium, and this one also has added calcium, so that's going to be helpful too. Now this one is really similar to this, but this is water soluble, so I can, you know, put this in my Miracle-Gro garden sprayer and use the hose to apply it, or I can mix it up in you know, a watering can and feed the plants that way. This is going to go straight down into the soil. It's been hot and my plants are thirsty, and they're going to absorb this pretty quickly. I will, it's getting later in the evening. I'll wait a little bit longer for the temperatures to cool off before I give this to the plants, and hopefully this will give it a little bit of a boost. Now, I have been working with those plants and since February or March. I've got a few good months of work into them, plenty of money into them, and I'm not taking any chances. So I'm going to give it the treatment. However, it's hot, and when it's hot out and it's been dry, it hasn't been rainy the last few days, the plants are stressed. And so anytime you do something a little bit different to your plants when they're stressed, you could cause more harm than good. So I will take this slow. These two I can apply right away. I'm going to put them on today. This one will take a little while to sort of kick in, so I'm not worried about putting that on in combination with this because it won't overwhelm the plant. Another thing I will need to do is really take a look at the damaged leaves on those plants and get those leaves off. I'll wait for a little cooler weather to do that too. That's risky too, especially when the leaves are stressed, and you know, I don't know for sure. There may be some disease on those plants that I may need to worry about too. So they're stressed. I'll take it easy, but I gotta get the dead leaves off in case there's some disease there. I don't want any pathogens to spread. This is gonna. I like that this has the added calcium, but I will also, maybe in a few days to a week, do a little bit more because I don't want to lose any more tomatoes. And I'm going to use a little bit of this rot stop, and this is just a calcium supplement that you can use on your tomato plants to help with blossom end rot immediately. I used this last year and I had great results. I don't know if it's just that, you know, my first few tomatoes were done and then it kind of goes away because That's what happens a little bit with Blossom and Rot. So I don't know if this actually helped or if it just got better on its own, but it didn't hurt. So I'm going to treat the plants with this rot stop as well. And finally, as far as nutrients go, a couple of micronutrients that aren't so much covered by the tomato tone and, you know, the Miracle-Gro for edibles is sulfur and magnesium. And so in a while, not today, I will also give the plants a treatment of Epsom salt. Epsom salt has been used for a very long time to help treat tomato plants. It has magnesium and sulfur in the plant, and so those are some of the nutrients that potentially my plants are missing. People have sworn by adding Epsom salt to their tomato plants for centuries. You know, that's probably, if you had grandparents growing in a garden, they would have said put Epsom salt in there. And this is just, you dissolve a tablespoon of Epsom salt into a gallon of water, and you can water right on the leaves as a foliar treatment, or you can spray on the leaves as a foliar treatment, or you can just water the ground around your tomato plants. So eventually I will get this on my tomato plants as well. I haven't forgotten about the possibility that there could be some disease on those plants. Like I said, I've got a lot of time and effort into those plants, and I don't want to lose any to either deficiency or disease. I'm leaning more towards the deficiency, but I'm going to also be very diligent about treating them for disease. So I don't have to do anything immediately because I just did a treatment. So the three most common things, you know, is early blight, late blight, and then the Septoria leaf spot. All three of those can be treated pretty effectively with a fungicide. And one wonderful fungicide that's organic that you can use is neem oil. Neem oil has a few uses. It's great for trying to head off some of those diseases because the oil makes it just difficult for the diseases to stay and to spread on the plant. In addition to that, neem oil is a great way to keep insects off your plant. So they'll stay off your plant, and you know, those insects who chew on the leaves and eat the plants will also be killed by the neem oil as well. So having a good regimen of treating your garden with neem oil or something similar, there are similar products that do the same thing, is a good idea. I mix this up in the, you know, big, you know, 2-gallon sprayer, and I just spray my entire garden every week. Would probably be a good regimen, especially now coming into Japanese beetle season. I will be doing this more often. But I'm gonna also keep something a little bit more potent on hand, and that is this copper fungicide. I had an issue last year with Septoria leaf spot on a couple of my pepper plants. I had one plant that had it pretty badly, and it had started to spread to a couple of neighboring plants. So what I did is I removed the plant that was really sick, and I sprayed the remainder of my plants with this copper fungicide, and it did the trick. I didn't have an issue with the leaf spot at all the remaining of the year. So I do have a video posted about how I did that. Last year I just got it in a spray bottle. This year I bought the concentrate so I can just put it in my own 2-gallon sprayer bottle and apply that. So I think that I'm going to continue to look for different types of fertilizer that I can use in the garden. I bought this one just because it was there and nothing else was. I didn't have any other options. So I'm going to continue to just look and decide if this is what's right for me. But hopefully, so I'm going to get started on these things pretty soon, and I'll keep everybody updated on how those go. And like I said with a cucumber plant before, I think I'm just going to take those out. I'm not going to bother with treating those. So that was a lot of information. But what I think, I hope you can take from this is just understanding that the all-purpose fertilizer is wonderful, but keep in mind that your plants are going to need some other nutrients, something maybe more specific to what you're growing. Remember also that the granular fertilizers take a while to work, so if you want something that's going to work immediately, go for, you know, a liquid water-soluble fertilizer like this one, to make things a little faster, or some other organic choices like the Epsom salt, which can be diluted in water and soak in really fast too. So hopefully that helped. I feel a lot better about it. I was really stumped about what I had in my garden, and I was really scared that I was going to lose 40 tomato plants and not have my spaghetti sauce and salsa for this year. But I feel much better about it. Let me know if you've been through this, or if, you know, some of my diagnoses or ideas are not the best choice, or not maybe what you would do in the garden, because I'm learning too. I'm not a master gardener. I learn by Googling and following my online gardening friends too. So please give me some feedback. Let me know if you've got other treatments or other, you know, other comments about what might be happening to my plants. The one thing that really makes me question is I didn't see anything that looked like the stems on my plants. So that's still a little bit scary to me, but I've got a plan to get started, and I will keep you updated on how it goes.